What if the biggest threat to your relationship isn't, a massive betrayal, but just, well, silence?
Yeah, that's a terrifying thought.
Right. I mean, we're so culturally obsessed with dramatic breakups, the screaming matches, the throne plates, the scandalous cheating.
Movie moments, basically.
Exactly.
Mm.
But according to a really striking manifesto on modern love that we are unpacking today, it's titled, Why Modern Relationships Fail. The real relationship killer is entirely invisible.
It really is. And it challenges the core of how society conditions us to view human connection, honestly.
Because we always look for the explosion, right?
Right, the sudden catalyst. But the reality of how people drift apart is far more insidious. It's a mechanical failure, not a sudden detonation.
Look, whether you're single or navigating the, let's face it, brutal modern dating world, or you've been married for decades, this material is going to hand you an entirely new lens on the quiet, invisible mechanics of why couples drift apart.
And more importantly, how to actually stop it.
Yes, exactly. Because before we can even examine how couples argue, the author insists we have to completely deconstruct the flawed foundation most people build their relationships on to begin with.
Which is that pervasive myth that love alone is enough.
Oh, man. The love conquers all trope.
Yeah. We treat love as a permanent shield, you know?
Yeah.
You find the right person, your brain releases this massive flood of oxytocin and dopamine, and you assume you are now completely protected from the elements. But this manifesto argues that love is not a shield at all. It is literally just the starting line.
Just the starting line. Wow.
The biggest cultural lie we're sold is if two people truly love each other, everything will work out.
Which, I mean, that sets you up for a devastating amount of cognitive dissonance when things inevitably get hard.
Absolutely.
Because if you operate on the belief that love is an absolute guarantee, then the moment you hit a wall, like the moment communication breaks down, your brain's immediate logical conclusion is, well, I guess we didn't truly love each other.
Right. It creates this incredibly fatalistic view of relationships.
Yeah.
The source material emphasizes that every single relationship, regardless of passion or compatibility, hits a point where love is simply no longer enough to sustain the structure.
It's just not enough material to hold up the house anymore.
Exactly. And that crossroads is where deliberate communication must take over, or the entire architecture begins to collapse.
And the collapse, as the manifesto points out, it almost never starts with a grand betrayal. It starts when two people stop feeling understood.
Yes.
Which doesn't arrive with a bang. It arrives in total silence. It's the silent treatment, but weaponized by something we rarely admit is sitting in the room with us, which is our ego.
The quiet ego.
The quiet ego, yeah. We usually define ego as this loud, boastful, arrogant trait.
Yeah.
But in the context of intimacy, ego doesn't shout. It whispers.
And the psychology behind that whisper is fascinating because it's fundamentally a threat detection system.
Wait, really? A threat system?
Yeah, your nervous system interprets emotional vulnerability as a literal threat to survival.
Oh, wow.
So that quiet ego isn't necessarily malice or arrogance. It's a primitive defense mechanism.
Just trying to keep you safe.
Right. It shuts down communication to keep you safe from emotional injury. It whispers phrases designed to protect your pride at the cost of your connection.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the phrases the author lists are so painfully recognizable. I mean, the ego whispers things in your ear like, don't text first.
Oh, yeah.
Or let them apologize they started it. Or, and I think this is the most damaging one, if they loved you, they would already know why you're upset.
That's the one.
It sounds like this quiet ego isn't a sudden explosion that destroys the relationship. It's a slow leak in a tire.
That's a great way to put it.
Like you don't even realize you're losing air until you are completely stranded on the side of the road and you've basically forgotten how to drive together.
What's fascinating here is, well, the slow leak is the perfect mechanism to describe this, honestly, because the tragic irony is that these couples don't stop talking because they stopped caring.
Right. It's not apathy.
No, the silence grows exponentially because neither person wants to be the first to lower their shield. The ego convinces your brain that initiating the repair is a sign of weakness.
So whoever speaks first loses.
Exactly. So you have a minor disagreement on a Tuesday. The ego says, give them the silent treatment for the night.
Just to teach them a lesson.
Right. But one night of silence calcifies into 2 days.
Yeah.
2 days of avoiding eye contact easily stretches into a week of walking on eggshells.
And suddenly, two people who used to stay up until 3 a.m. because they couldn't stop talking to each other are sitting on the same couch acting like total strangers.
Exactly.
They're physically occupying the same space, but emotionally they are in completely different time zones.
The silence slowly replaces the honesty. And the author notes that the most terrifying aspect of this transition is the lack of awareness.
Because it's so gradual.
Yes, because the ego is protecting you from immediate emotional discomfort, you don't realize the chasm is widening until the distance feels just too vast to cross without a massive, exhausting effort.
But let's say the silence eventually breaks. Someone finally speaks up. This is where the source material introduces an entirely new mechanical failure.
Yes, the translation gap.
Right. We move from the protective silence of the ego to the sheer tragedy of the translation gap.
The translation gap is where the best intentions are completely scrambled. When the silence breaks, the assumption is that speaking will solve the problem.
Like, final we're talking.
Right. But the manifesto highlights that men and women, or really any two partners with different emotional conditioning, often do not hear the same conversation, even when they are using the exact same vocabulary.
The examples the text gives for this translation gap are incredibly illuminating. Let's take a really common scenario, right? A woman says, "You never listen to me."
Classic example.
On a literal level, that sounds like an accusation about auditory function, right? Or like a critique of his attention span.
Yeah, that's how it's usually received.
But the text argues we have to look at the underlying emotional coding. What she actually means is, I don't feel emotionally safe right now.
Exactly. And consider the societal conditioning driving the counterpoint. A man says, "I'm fine."
Oh, the dreaded "I'm fine."
Right. Pop culture and social conditioning tell us that this means he is being stoic or dismissive or maliciously withholding information.
Like he's just shutting her out on purpose.
But psychologically, what he often means is, my cognitive load is completely maxed out, and I literally don't have the emotional vocabulary to explain what is happening inside my nervous system right now.
Wow. So the words on the surface are completely different and, honestly, pretty antagonistic.
Very.
But the underlying pain, that desperate biological need to be understood and validated, is exactly the same.
It's identical.
You have two people standing in the same room,
Yeah.
speaking two entirely different emotional languages, both wondering why the other person is refusing to just use a dictionary.
Which logically leads to what the manifesto identifies as the single most dangerous sentence in any relationship.
You should already know.
You should already know. Yes, the expectation of telepathy.
It's so toxic.
It's this deeply ingrained belief that if your partner possesses a sufficient amount of love for you, they should magically be able to bypass that translation gap, read your mind, anticipate your unvoiced needs, and decode your resentful silence.
But wait, I need to push back on this a little bit.
Sure.
Because we are pattern-seeking machines, right? If you've been with someone for 5, 10, or 20 years, you live together, you share a whole life together, shouldn't your brain develop a predictive model of your partner's behavior?
Well, yes, it does do that.
Because isn't it exhausting to have to vocalize every single minor emotional shift? I mean, shouldn't they know by year 5 that when I aggressively wash the dishes, I'm stressed about work and I just need them to take the trash out?
It's a completely valid frustration. And our brains absolutely do build predictive models to save cognitive energy. That's true.
Right.
But the source material takes a very firm, scientifically grounded stance here. Relying on those predictive models long-term is a trap.
A trap.
Because human beings are dynamic, neuroplastic organisms. We are constantly evolving. Expecting your partner to operate on a static, predictive model is basically expecting them to interact with a ghost of who you were 3 years ago.
So the emotional map they drew of me in year 1 is fundamentally outdated by year 5.
Exactly. What stressed you out 3 years ago might not be what stresses you out today. And the kind of comfort you needed then might actually feel stifling now.
That makes a lot of sense.
Healthy couples do not rely on assumed telepathy because love does not grow in the assumptions. It grows in the deliberate, friction-filled space of clear, honest, and repeated conversations.
Because the target is always moving.
The target is always moving. Relying on past intuition without present communication is literally the fastest way to end up projecting your own current insecurities onto your partner's actions.
Yeah, that reliance on outdated emotional maps, combined with the human desire to just avoid friction altogether, it seems to perfectly explain why the modern dating landscape is such a uniquely terrifying minefield right now.
Oh, absolutely.
The author dedicates a significant portion of the text to how this specifically plays out today.
We're looking at a very specific historical moment for human connection. The manifesto highlights the stark paradox of modern romance. Think about it. We have an entire lexicon dedicated to avoidance.
Ghosting, situationships, orbiting.
Breadcrumbing, love bombing.
It's an entire vocabulary built around escaping the translation gap rather than crossing it.
Exactly. The paradox is that technology has removed all the logistical friction from communication. You can transmit a thought to anyone on the globe in a fraction of a second.
We're so connected.
Logically, we should be closer than ever. Yet, psychologically, people report feeling more emotionally isolated than in any previous generation.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me, because the text makes a brilliant, razor-sharp distinction between instant communication and actual intimacy. We confuse the two constantly. But a text message is asynchronous. It gives you time to draft, edit, curate your response. It completely removes the real-time vulnerability, that messy, unedited friction that is biologically required to build actual intimacy.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, a text message is fundamentally just data transfer. It is literally moving information from one server to another.
Right, it's just data.
But intimacy requires emotional presence. It requires your nervous system to regulate in the presence of another human being's nervous system. You can't do that over a screen.
And the manifesto actually gives us the blueprint for how to build that presence, and it radically opposes what romantic comedies have conditioned us to expect.
Oh, completely.
We are taught to look for the grand gestures, the sweeping apologies, the surprise vacations, the expensive jewelry on the anniversary.
And those grand gestures, sure, they require capital planning, execution, but they actually require very little emotional vulnerability.
Wow. It's like building a relationship out of fireworks. They are flashy, they are highly visible to the neighbors, they make a huge noise, but they burn out in 5 seconds and leave you in the dark again.
That's exactly it.
What the author argues for instead is the unglamorous architecture of everyday kindness, the actual bricks and mortar of the house you were trying to live in.
The antidote to modern dating fatigue isn't a grand romantic gesture. It's micro moments of attunement.
Micro moments.
Yeah. The manifesto lists these tiny, almost imperceptible actions: reaching out for a hug without being prompted, asking a genuine, "How are you?" and actually waiting for the answer.
Not just treating it as a greeting.
Right. Making sustained eye contact when they're talking to you rather than just nodding while you scroll through your phone.
Oh, the phone scrolling. We're all guilty of that.
Saying thank you for the mundane, repetitive chores that keep a life running.
The formula the source provides is elegantly simple, yet incredibly difficult to execute consistently. Small, consistent actions create psychological trust.
Yes.
Trust creates a safe environment for intimacy. And intimacy is the only mechanism that keeps love alive when the initial neurochemical infatuation eventually metabolizes and fades.
Because it always fades.
Right. So if those micro moments of attunement build the infrastructure of the house, how do you keep the roof from caving in when a real conflict arises?
Well, that's the real test.
Because we know the ego is always waiting in the wings, right?
Yeah.
And the translation gap is always a risk. When the relationship fractures, what is the absolute baseline requirement to fix it?
It comes down to a concept that most people actively resist. You cannot build or repair a healthy relationship without radical accountability.
Accountability.
Yeah.
That implies a total surrender of that ego we were just talking about.
It demands the death of the ego in that moment. The
Mhm.
source makes it crystal clear. You cannot successfully communicate with a partner who is entering the conversation with the sole objective of winning.
Oh, this is such a vital point. If you approach a disagreement with your partner like a courtroom battle, where you're the prosecutor and they're the defendant, and one of you must be proven unequivocally right and the other unequivocally wrong, the relationship itself becomes the casualty.
It's like two computer routers trying to sync up, but they're both stuck in transmit mode.
Oh, I love that analogy.
They've completely disabled their receive functions. You're throwing massive packets of data, arguments, and historical grievances at each other, but nothing is actually being downloaded or processed.
You just get a perpetual network error.
Exactly.
Because if you're so focused on winning the argument, you aren't listening to your partner's pain. You're just using the time they are speaking to mentally reload your own debate points.
This raises an important question for you to ask yourself right now. Think about the last major conflict you had with someone you love.
Yeah, picture it.
While they were speaking, were you listening to understand the emotional reality they were experiencing? Or were you listening strictly to find the logical flaw in their timeline so you could dismantle their argument?
Oof. The text is unapologetically brutal about the reality of this dynamic, too. It says you cannot save a relationship unilaterally.
You really can't.
Healing is a two-person mechanism. If one person is doing all the heavy lifting, bringing all the vulnerability, initiating all the repairs, taking accountability, while the other person just sits back with their arms crossed, protecting their ego, and refusing to look at their own behavior.
The structural foundation is already compromised beyond
Yeah,
repair.
exactly. Which brings us to what the author calls the ultimate diagnostic test of a relationship's health. It strips away all the complex psychological frameworks and boils it down to one profound metric.
And it's a powerful one.
This was the moment in the source material that actually stopped me in my tracks. It asks you to reflect on a very specific feeling. When was the last time someone felt completely understood by you, not judged, not interrupted because you had a similar anecdote you wanted to share?
Right, no pivoting back to yourself.
No being corrected on a minor logistical detail in their story, just completely profoundly understood.
The author posits that the greatest actualization of love isn't passion or provision. The greatest act of love is simply utilizing your own emotional bandwidth to make another human being feel entirely heard.
So what does this all mean when we put the pieces together? When we look at the slow leak of the ego, the messy reality of the translation gap, the necessity of everyday infrastructure over flashy fireworks, and the absolute demand for accountability,
It's a lot to process.
it paints a picture of human connection that is incredibly demanding, but deeply hopeful, I think.
I agree.
It means the strongest relationships on Earth aren't built by perfectly compatible people who never fight or never have doubts. They're built by deeply flawed, heavily conditioned people who simply choose to prioritize understanding over their own ego.
Over and over again, it is a daily, sometimes minute-by-minute choice.
Yeah,
The initial spark, the chemistry, the infatuation, that is just the key turning in the lock to get you inside the door.
like we said, the starting line.
But checking your ego at that door, abandoning the childish expectation of telepathy, and actively choosing the vulnerability of presence, that is the ongoing labor required to keep you inside the room together.
It's about building that infrastructure of emotional
Yeah.
safety so that the next time they say, I'm fine, and you know they aren't, you don't just accept the brush off because it's easier.
Right.
You have the patience to sit in the friction with them and help them find the real words.
But, before we close out this analysis, the manifesto throws one final curveball that completely flips the perspective.
Oh yes, this part is wild.
We've spent this entire time talking about understanding the other person. But the author challenges us with a vital prerequisite. If the greatest act of love is making someone else feel completely understood, how well do you actually understand yourself?
Oh wow, turning the mirror completely around.
It is the blind spot we all ignore. Before you allow your ego to get frustrated that your partner can't read your mind, or before you get angry that they are misinterpreting your defensive silence, you have to ask yourself a very uncomfortable question.
Okay.
Have you even done the internal work to figure out the vocabulary for what you are feeling? Or are you secretly utilizing your silence because you are hoping they will do the emotional heavy lifting of figuring you out for you?
That is a staggering thought to walk away with.
It really is.
We get so resentful at the other person for not crossing the divide and breaking the silence without taking accountability for the fact that we haven't even figured out what we would say to them if they did.
Exactly.
We demand they cross the bridge to save us, but we haven't even bothered to lay the bricks on our side of the chasm.
We project our own internal lack of clarity onto them, framing it as a failure of their love. It is the ultimate, most sophisticated trick the quiet ego plays on us.
Well, on that note, we have journeyed through some intense territory today. From deconstructing the myth of the love shield to the slow leak of the ego to the realization that actual intimacy is built on making eye contact and simply saying thank you.
It's been a deep one.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive today. These are tough, uncomfortable realities to confront, especially if you recognize some of these silent behaviors or avoidance tactics in your own life right now.
But as this manifesto brilliantly illustrates, acknowledging the mechanics of that silence is the absolute prerequisite to dismantling it.
Stepping out from behind the shield of your ego requires immense vulnerability. But it is the only viable path to genuine connection.
Truly.
The next time you feel that primitive urge to retreat into silence, or you catch yourself expecting telepathy, remember the difference between fireworks and infrastructure. Take a breath, drop the transmit mode, and choose to listen. We will catch you on the next deep dive.